Well, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us for this Europe-based Octopus 101. My name is John Bristowe. Thank you for your time and attention joining us here today. Really happy to have you. If you want to, you can submit your questions and comments in the comment pane wherever you're joining us from via social media or StreamYard. We're broadcasting to all our social media there. This is Octopus 101. The whole purpose of this is to give you basically the building blocks to understanding Octopus and Octopus Deploy, how it works, what it's made of, why you might use it, some taxonomy terms, etc. And it's a very demo heavy session. So you'll see Octopus in a very detailed form. You'll see how it works, and we'll go through a bunch of demos as part of that. My goal at the end of this is to ensure that you are well versed in the world of Octopus. I am John Bristowe, by the way. I should probably introduce myself. I'm the community director for Octopus Deploy. And again, thank you for your time and attention joining us here today. If you need to reach me, you can send me an email by either, if you want to send me an email, you can. You can reach out to me on social media. That's fine. Happy to take your questions there. Just as a point of order or a housekeeping note, this session is being recorded. It will be available up on our YouTube channel, or you will receive an email after the fact stating where you can watch this recording if you so wish. So if you have any questions, feel free to send me an email, as I said before. So what are you going to learn during this webinar? So first things we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about what Octopus is, how it works, and most importantly, why you should consider it for a deployment solution. Too oftentimes, at least in my experience, I don't know about you, but for me, I find that a lot of times you'll be introduced to a technology and you're kind of sitting there wondering, why would I use this? I don't see the value in this. And so my goal is to try and demonstrate that to you. And hopefully by the end of this webinar, you'll be convinced that you need some form of deployment process. Anything automated is better than nothing. The second goal of this is, of course, for you to learn some of the taxonomy around Octopus. We're going to talk about things like projects. We're going to talk about deployment processes. We'll talk about things like releases and other things. These and other terms you'll hear throughout this webinar. Don't worry if you don't understand them all at the start. You'll come to understand them. They're basically ways in which we represent how things work within Octopus. The third goal is to show you how to create a deployment process. We're going to do this from scratch, sort of like a cooking show. We'll start with basic ingredients, what we call steps. We'll build up a deployment process, and along the way, we may pull out some pre-made recipes and show you some of those things, so you get a sense of what that looks like in a more complicated scenario. And then finally, we'll show you how you can trigger a deployment using a CI process or server. So a CI process or server, to me, is anything that is involving continuous integration. So CI, or continuous integration, is a process by which you periodically or repeatedly build and test your source code. But people typically, this is synonymous with a build server, etc. And there are many solutions out there, things like GitHub Actions, TeamCity, Azure DevOps, Jenkins, BuildKite. The list goes on and on. We've seen them all because most life around CI/CD springs or starts with a CI process, and so that's why we're going to be discussing how you can trigger deployment from that place. All right, so that seems like a pretty good use of our time. Let's start by talking a little bit about the state of deployments today. So I've got a little bit of a mock diagram here. Forgive me for the simplicity of this, but this is what we like to think of as the state of the world. So on the left, we have our app. On the right, we have our customers, and somewhere in there is us, the lowly DevOps engineer. You can see here that we're pretty happy. Life is good. We're possibly using automation to do deployments. And we've got a pretty simple scenario here for doing those deployments. That is, we're simply deploying them to a single customer or a group of customers that are very synonymous with each other. So life is easy. But as we all know, in the world of software, nothing stays stagnant or static like this, and things tend to change. And so over time, what may happen is your deployment process may change. You may have, as your business grows or as your app evolves, you may have new customers that come on, and you may want to service those customers with different types of applications. Those applications can be hosted in a wide variety of environments. For example, here you can see I have Kubernetes, cloud, and on-premise solutions in production. I may have different versions depending upon my customers of my app. You may notice that I'm not looking as happy as I once was. life's getting a little bit complicated. I've decided to do the right thing. I'm using deployment scripts, I'm using automation, but managing all that stuff turns out to be a challenge. And so as a result, I'm not as happy as I once was. And of course, this can just get really, really gnarly. I mean, I'm here, my head explodes really because I've got any number of different types of customers with any number of different types of deployment targets, environments. Forget about rollbacks. I mean, this is just the ship is always moving forward. The train moves in one direction, and so this gets really hard as you grow and as you scale, and that's kind of the idea as to why you need a deployment solution. So, Octopus Deploy, we would like to propose is basically making complex deployments easy. So here, basically, deployment is managed by Octopus. It's a single deployment automation platform with a single source of truth to manage all your projects for deployments. And so if you're looking for something that provides consistency and compliance and in a robust way that allows you to do deployment patterns very easily, Octopus Deploy is a great solution for that. Most solutions you see in the industry today are afterthoughts. They're typically bolt-on features you see in CI products. So you'll see things like environment progression or deployment patterns. A lot of that stuff you'll have to roll yourself. You'll have to write a lot of YAML. You'll have to write a lot of custom scripts to do these sorts of patterns. This is just out of the box with Octopus Deploy, and that's part of the reason why you may consider it as a solution. So obviously, this is a very simplistic view of the world. You can represent it in any number of ways. It should be noted that Octopus treats pretty much every target the same, whether you're deploying to on cloud, on premise, on different types of infrastructure, from a variety of locations coming, whether those locations are from CI processes or package repositories, etc. Whatever it is you're looking to do in terms of a deployment pattern, we certainly support that. And I mean, the reason for this is pretty obvious. I mean, if you're doing deployments today, simply through deployment scripts, it can be a bit complicated. With Octopus Deploy, we like to think that this is much more manageable, a lot more safe and sane way in which you can do deployments to your environments. And of course, the architecture for this allows you to facilitate a wide variety of scenarios. So in this one here, where we're outlining how you can integrate with GitHub, for example, we have a lot of different solutions available. We have our GitHub Actions support. We have a GitHub app. We also have a extension for GitHub Copilot as well. So Copilot is a very awesome technology, and we have an extension for it. So you can actually talk to Octopus through VS Code, through Copilot, ask what are the state of my deployments, and get an answer back. So these and other scenarios are well thought out. And it's not just GitHub, it's other scenarios as well. Independent of any CI process you're going to use, you have great support for those in Octopus Deploy. And of course, there's a wide variety of targets, as I've said before, that allows you to support this. All right, that's enough of the preamble there. Let's go ahead and get into a demo, my favorite part of any sort of presentation. So let's go ahead and switch over. First and foremost, this is octopus.com. If you haven't seen our website, this is what it looks like. You can sign up for a free trial. If you click on this button here, you'll be taken to a page that looks like, well, hopefully my internet's better than this. You'll see to a page that looks like this. You'll have the option here of choosing whether you want to download the software and install it yourself, or you can create a cloud instance, which is what I'm going to be showing you here. So I would highly, if you want to kick the tires yourself, highly recommend you go ahead and click this button here, start a trial for yourself, and get a sense of what it's like. We have all our resources available here. Again, this is all on octopus.com, our website. All right, let's take a look at Octopus. All right, so this is my cloud instance, and this is the dashboard for Octopus Deploy. So a dashboard can be pretty complex. A dashboard is meant to provide a lot of information in a single pane. Looking at a different example of this, you can see that these things can get a little bit interesting to look at. So what we're seeing here is we have a list of projects. So our projects here are listed on the left-hand side. These are arranged in groups. And then across the top here, we have these names here called development, test, staging, pre-production, and production. These are our environments. Environments, as you'll come to see, is one of the many terms we use to describe a series of deployment targets. So you can have a wide variety of targets inside each environment. It's a way you're thinking about where you're pushing deployments to. And for each one of these projects, can also see the state of each version of that project. So I'm using here semantic versioning. I can see that we had a successful deployment. I can also see when that deployment actually occurred. If I drill into one of these deployments, I can get information about that deployment. I can see all the details that went into this deployment, the steps, all the tasks that ran, who ran it, the packages involved, the artifacts. I can get a run log, etc., etc. So there's lots of details in a deployment that you can see, and will give you compliance and history and logs, etc., etc. So what this is basically a one-stop shop or a single pane of glass to view how your deployments are progressing. Jumping back to my previous instance here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what it looks like from the perspective of a first run, because that is kind of like the hello world. So let's go ahead and set that up. And I just want to make sure that I'm answering your questions. I'm going to just keep the keep the answers. So Chris here, thank you very much. Ready, steady, deploy. Crush, kill, deploy. Exactly. So ready, steady, deploy. Awesome. I love it. So this is live. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Happy to answer them here. All right. So let's go ahead, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a new space. You can see here we have what are called spaces. I have two spaces here, one called default space, one called Octopus deploy. A space is an isolation boundary. So if you want to keep your projects separate from each other, for a variety of means, you may be using Octopus deploy across a wide variety of teams, and maybe just to clear up confusion or separate permissions, etc. You may want to create your own space for your own team. You can certainly do that. It allows you to do that quickly. I'm going to go ahead and create one here called Octopus 101, and I'll make myself the manager for this and click Save. Then I'm going to go ahead and jump into that space, and we'll see what it looks like from the first run experience. So we've done a lot of work to make the first run experience a lot better in Octopus. Back in the day, it was just a blank canvas, and you'd be like, I don't know what to do. You just randomly click buttons. Now we guide you through that process. So you'll notice here you can actually take a look at a video if you so wish. And we have a variety of getting started guides as well. So if you're doing your first Kubernetes deployment, or you're doing your first deployment to a different target, we give you guides on that as well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this green button here called Getting Started. And the process here is pretty much the same each and every time. You're going to set up a project once, you're going to configure it, and then you're going to let it go. You're going to let it do its thing in terms of automation for deployments. That's essentially the process by which you set up Octopus. So I'll give this a project name. Everyone loves a Hello World demo, so we'll call it Hello Octopus. And then it's going to ask me, where do I want to store all the settings, the process itself for the project, any non-sensitive variables? Do I want to store it in Octopus? Or if I want, I can store it in a Git repository. So you can actually back up the settings, everything that you have related to this project in a Git repository. You might ask why. It might be useful if you're a developer type. You can certainly create pull requests and propagate changes through a Git-based repository and have those changes automatically picked up by Octopus. So if you want to do that, create branches, etc., to control your deployment processes, you can certainly do that. It's something we built into Octopus and we support. For this demo, though, I'm just going to choose Octopus because it's the easiest one to demo. I'll just go ahead and show that one. I can also specify a variety of other options here. We won't worry about that for now. We'll just go ahead and create the project. Now, after I'm done creating the project, the next question it's going to ask me is, hey, you need to at least have one environment to deploy to. You know, it doesn't make sense to deploy to nothing. So let's go ahead and establish some environments. An environment is a name. It's a semantic name that you give to a series of deployment targets. So let's say I have a web server here, and I want to classify those with different environment names. I can go ahead and define them accordingly, give them as many names as I want. These are just ones that we randomly, well, not randomly, we give you these names just as a sort of canonical representation. But you can set this up later if you want, but I'll go ahead and create these environments and click on next. Now, we're now inside the heart of Octopus deploy, which is basically the deployment process. This is where you define the deployment process, which is a collection of steps that occur when doing a deployment. So much like a recipe you might follow, like break the eggs, beat the eggs, add butter, etc., then do this, then preheat your oven, etc. A deployment process is a series of steps, much like directions in a recipe card, for you to define what it is you want to do when you do a deployment. And out of the box, we have a variety of steps built into Octopus. We highlight some of the featured ones here. So we have ones like, deploy a Helm chart, We have like run an Azure script. These and other steps you'll find on the featured list. But we have a wide variety of categories you'll see here. So we have ones that are based on scripts, ones that are package based. You can see we have ones that are focused on containers and orchestration. If you're deploying to the cloud, we have support obviously out of the box for a variety of cloud providers, AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, for example. We can do a wide variety of other operations as well. If there's a built-in step that we don't have support for, guess what? There's over 526 community steps built in that you can pick from. So these are things like, hey, I want to integrate with Argo, or maybe there's something ASP.NET specific I want to target, or maybe I want to do a database migration via Flyway. I want to get some integration there, I can do that. We even have support for things like Microsoft Teams, or Slack, or HashiCorp products like Vault, etc. These and other steps are built by the community, and they are available for you to use if you so wish. Let's go ahead and jump back here, and we'll start off by creating a deployment process using the simplest one that we have available, which is called run a script. Incidentally, this is our most popular or most frequently used step by far by customers. It's kind of like, let me take the wheel and drive. So we'll go ahead and add this step, and let me show you what happens here. So when I've added this step, what's happened now is I have now in the well here, you can see it says run a script. So this is the first step of my deployment process. If I added other deployment process steps here, they would show up in this well one after another. Now, don't be intimidated by all the knobs and bells and whistles you see here. What you're seeing here is all the either metadata properties or direct properties associated with this step. So I've said to Octopus, I want to run a script, and now I have to define it. So the script itself will be defined in one of three locations, either inline, I'll write the script myself. It will be located in a Git repository, which I'll set up, or it will be part of what's called a package. A package is like a zip archive or something that I can use, a tarball, etc. A package that I will pull from a location. We support a wide variety of package locations, what we call feeds. And you can see I can add new package locations here. So let's say I'm publishing packages to Artifactory, or maybe I'm utilizing an OCI registry. I can set that up ahead of time and then just pull down packages. Those packages may be dependencies, for example. So you can specify all this ahead of time and then utilize that ahead of time. I'm just going to use inline script. So I'm going to write the script inline here. So notice that out of the box, we have support for 5 languages. So common sort of scenario languages for writing a script. Because this is PowerShell, I'll use write host, and I'll say hello Octopus, everyone's favorite. Notice here I can also do things like insert a variable. So Octopus has a very rich variable subsystem. So you can reference a wide variety of properties. And the reason for this is because this is often something that happens a lot. When you're writing your own deployment scripts, oh, sorry, I'm getting some feedback here saying the screen sharing is stuck. I'm hoping that you can see the latest updates. I'm seeing the latest updates here. If you're not, I apologize. So hopefully that is, if anything, you can watch the recording. I'm sure it will be in full fidelity. Sorry about that. So the reason why we have these variables here is because oftentimes what happens, too often you see when you write your own scripts for deployments, is you often forget, like, oh yeah, the settings differ between development and staging, or development and prod. I may want to parameterize or provide variables for those things ahead of time. We provide ones out of the box. You can certainly define your own, and you can integrate those as part of a deployment step. You can inject them here for a script. We support sensitive values as well. There's a bunch of other operations as well that you can do with them. I can specify a bunch of other operations or settings here for run a script. I can specify a whole bunch of conditions. I'm not going to bore you with all the semantics here because there's really a lot of stuff here. It's pretty powerful stuff. But I defined here basically what I want to do for this script. So what I'm about to do is I'm going to click save, but I'm doing this because I'm deliberately adding an error here. When I click on save, we actually validate the step for you and make sure that everything looks fine. You'll notice I have a problem with this request. It says, please select one or more target tags that run a script step will apply to. So a target tag defines a tag that you can give to a wide variety of targets. The reason why we support this is because oftentimes people have hundreds, if not thousands, of targets that they want to deploy to. And rather than identifying each and every one, you can apply a tag to that target and say, actually, all these servers or all these machines are, Eastern Europe. All the other ones are Western Europe, that sort of thing. I can define those accordingly. I can also do that via tenants as well, which is another feature. So down here, it's asking me to specify a target tag. Now, I'm just going to use the one that they've generated here. You can certainly add different ones as well. I'm just doing this for the demo. So if I click on save, it will now give me a warning saying, hey, you've applied the tag, but you don't have any targets defined for the tag. So you have to define some. So just taking a quick look at what targets look like. A target is a physical machine that you will deploy to. So you can see here we have a wide variety of targets. So we have integration with Kubernetes. You can install an agent and target that if you wish. We have deployment targets for Linux, Mac, Windows, Azure, AWS. We also have support for what's called a cloud region, which is basically a provisioned location that we provide if you're utilizing Octopus Cloud, etc. This terminology here, this tentacle terminology, is synonymous with the word agent or worker. It's basically the same idea that a tentacle is basically that. It's a piece of software that will either listen, waiting for commands, or will pull or call home, asking what would you like to do? Do you want to do a deployment? Do you want to run a runbook? We'll talk about that in a second. What was it that you would like me to do? So I'll just go ahead and provision a cloud region here. I'll give it a name. Let's call it foo, whatever. I'll select what environments I want to deploy to this one or make it a target for, and I'll give it a target tag. So I think previously it was hello Octopus targets as an example. I can also specify what's called a worker pool, etc. I don't have to do that here. So I've got my deployment target now set up, which is great. So now if I come back here and I take a look at my process, I've gone ahead and defined my script. The next thing I can do is now get to what I think everyone's looking forward to, which is creating a release. So a word of a side note worth mentioning here is that when we create a release, what we're doing here is we're actually not creating what most developers would think as a actual release that goes out. It's what we like to call a snapshot. So a release is a versioned, in a sense, archive of all the stuff that went into defining a deployment process, all the packages, all the variables, the version itself. You can use semantic versioning as well if you wish. The release notes, like if you're utilizing this as part of build information, which are like your commits, all that stuff will get integrated as part of a release. And then when you use that release, you can then push that out to an environment for you to use. Now, the reason why this is useful, the reason why we create what we call a snapshot is because you want the ability to preserve the state of that release as part of it so that rollbacks are far easier. If things change dynamically without variables, if they change dynamically, things get really brittle. So by creating a snapshot of your packages, your Git resources, things like the variable updates, the variable snapshot itself, you can update those variables as well. That's why we have, if you integrate a variable and you want to update it, you can click on this update variables button to do that. All these things go into creating that snapshot. So that's why we create a release and then make it available for you to do a deployment. So what we're going to do here is deploy to our environment called development. And I know that there's lots of screens you've seen here, but once you've set this all up, it's ready to go. So what we're doing now is we're saying we can specify things like, when do you want this release to go out? Do you want it to go now? Do you want it to go later? Do you want to schedule this at a certain time? You can also give it a priority. So it's a new feature we have available in Octopus called prioritized deployments. You can reorder these things. You can even go so far as saying, look, I know I defined this deployment process, but for me as the DevOps person doing the deployment, I may want to exclude certain steps from running as part of this particular deployment. And so you can just go in here and check off any sort of steps you want to exclude as part of this deployment. These and other capabilities you can certainly enable. So let's go ahead and now deploy this. Oh, sorry, my mouse is acting a little bit weird. So now that I've done this deployment, we'll now see what's happening here, which is our task log. The task log here is what I showed you earlier, that detailed view of everything that's occurring I'm doing this against obviously that cloud instance, that cloud region I showed you earlier. If I choose to do this in a verbose manner, you can see I get all the logs here. I can even see things like, who's running this, why, what possibly it's why it's running, etc. These and other values are persisted as part of the task log itself, and I get a summary of this as it executes. Now, obviously, when I'm doing this, there's a provisioning of the cloud region itself, so there's a little bit of a setup here, a bootstrap. But once that's done, it will execute the script, and we get the happy sort of congratulations, you've done a deployment form, which is awesome. So at the bottom here, you can see there's our command console, println, whatever you want to call it, write host, etc. Hello, Octopus. And there you see your first deployment. As part of this, in addition to that, you also get a history. So who ran the deployment, etc. Any changes that went into this, if there were. Any associated build information. This is part of your commits. So if you're integrating this with Git, for example, these would be your, the pull requests that you possibly have, the commits that went into this release, etc., and they would show up here. You can incidentally make them as part of your release notes. I also have the option here of deploying this to staging after the fact if I so wish. But jumping back here to my deployments tab, you'll notice that now we have 0.0.1 release now available as part of the development environment. And that is essentially the hello world demo of Octopus Deploy. We've seen now how a deployment is done. Now there's lots of other parts to Octopus as well. We haven't even touched runbooks or tenants or anything like that. But this is essentially how deployments are done at a very, very high level with Octopus. All right, so let's jump back to our slides. And let's talk a little bit about some of the things we've touched on here. Don't worry, I'm going to get into another demo, so it's all good. So in a more complicated scenario where you have more steps involved, you may see something like looks like this. As part of this, we give you a visual representation of how these steps are represented. We also have the ability, and this is something that I didn't have a chance to talk about, but the steps that you integrate here can actually run in parallel. So you can have child steps, you can have steps that run in parallel, you can have conditions on those steps. So you can say things like, if the previous step did not succeed, run this, or don't run this, or always run it, things like that. We represent that visually as part of this deployment process diagram. In addition to that, we also provide you integrated markdown notes. The reason why this is useful is because obviously in a team-based tool, you may want to share like what these steps do to other members of your team. We give you, as I said before, ability to do parallel step execution. We also give you the ability to denote which environments the steps will run against. So there are cases where you'll define a deployment process, but then you'll say, listen, I want this deployment process to run in a certain way depending upon the environment that it's targeting. So a good example of this might be like, if I'm deploying to staging, I want to send a Slack message to the team to let them know, hey, a new build is available up on staging. And I might put that at the end of my deployment process. So that is something I can do. Or alternatively, I may want to add steps to give me assurance when I'm deploying to, say, something like production. We have steps that allow you to do that. There are steps that allow you to do things called manual interventions, which allow you to basically say, go grab a human being to approve this deployment who has the permissions to do so. These and other types of steps we have built into Octopus. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about some of the other reasons why you might use Octopus. Again, this is important for understanding the technology itself. So first and foremost, what you've seen so far in the demo is pretty high level, but I think you'll get a sense that when you do these deployments, you're doing so in a very reliable and risk-free manner. We take the time to define your environments, your deployment process. We take snapshots of your release, as I showed you before, and these are all really important things to do in order to get facilities built in that allow you to do deployments with confidence. You can actually deploy on Friday. Yes, you should be deploying on Friday. And the reason why is because you should have confidence in your deployments to do so. A good deployment process will trump any day of the week. Believe me, you can deploy on Sunday if you'd like. So doing this in a repeatable, reliable manner turns out to be really, really important. That's one of the main reasons why we provide this technology. Another capability, which I alluded to, but I haven't shown yet, is called runbooks. So what we saw a lot with customers was oftentimes a DevOps team would go about doing its deployments, and then there would be another team that would be completely in isolation, like they wouldn't realize what was going on, and that was typically the other pod of the DevOps team, which is the operations team. And typically, what you'll see in those scenarios is there's a lot of reasons, or there's a lot of things you want to do with your infrastructure. So you want to maybe back up a database, or you want to roll out an update, or patch a server. These and types of other types of operations are very similar to deployment process. They are typically a series of steps that you can run. And so we provide that facility through a capability called runbooks. So runbooks are a first class feature in Octopus. You can run them. And the nice thing here is that they allow you to execute either routine or emergency operations tasks without needing to share credentials or anything like that. You define the runbook process once, you get everything integrated, and then what you can do is you can then give the task to one of your IT ops or ops teams to perform these routine procedures, or in some cases, emergency procedures. Let's say, you've noticed that in certain cases, the database will go down, and we have now written a run book to restore that database. I can then utilize that run book after the fact, and follow that as uh, uh, an ability to bring basically my infrastructure back online. So that is a capability we have built in Octopus itself. If utilizing containers or targeting Kubernetes, we have built-in support for YAML, Helm charts, etc. Serves this all out through the UI, which is great. And then we have another feature, which is something that we typically see with more mature users of folks who have been using Octopus for a long time, called tenants. Now, most folks, when they use Octopus for the first time, they're like, I can't see myself wanting to use tenants. Folks who have been using Octopus for a long time are like, this is my favorite feature ever. Tenants are a way in which you can have a deployment to different types of customers. So there's ways in which you can do this at the application level. You can build your application in such a way that it's aware that this deployment is going to Eastern Europe versus Western Europe, and give you different information based on that. What a tenant allows you to do is basically surface that information out and put it into this thing we call a tenant, and then you do the typical deployments you would do in Octopus, but target different types of tenants with different versions of your software. This is a hugely powerful capability, and we are the only deployment tool that offers this built-in multi-tenancy support. So the scenario that we outline here as an example is, let's say you're running a veterinary clinic, and you want to provide different versions of your software to different types of users of that vet clinic software, depending upon where they're located or the type of customer that they are. Customer is synonymous with any type of geo-based location or customer type, etc. So that is a scenario that you can think about as part of this. Now, of course, when I mentioned Octopus, all that stuff you saw with the audit log around governance, risk, compliance, etc., all of that is everything is tracked within Octopus itself. So you saw an example of that briefly when I showed you the audit log for the deployment I showed you. But anything around role-based security, we have a huge permission set based in Octopus. Don't worry, it's not too complex to understand, but it's hugely powerful. And it allows you to basically set this up any way you wish. Deployments, of course, are a very privileged operation. You want to make sure that you do them because you're shipping out to production. You want to make sure that that's done with peace of mind. In addition to that, we also have integrations with a variety of solutions as well. I mentioned just 4 here. So you can stream your audit logs to solutions like Sumo or Splunk. We also have integration with solutions like Jira Service Desk, or Jira Service Management rather, and ServiceNow. So the idea is that you can use a solution like ServiceNow where you typically will provision releases. You'll have like a change request go through, and that has to be approved. When that approval is given inside of ServiceNow, that will then trigger the release to be done by Octopus. So you can use ServiceNow as an arbiter of releases, and you can use Octopus as the sort of release mechanism based off of that. So those sorts of integrations are well built in, and is really, really powerful when you start combining these systems together. All right, just checking the comments here, not seeing any additional questions. That's fine. Let's go ahead and jump into a different demo. I'd rather just do demos anyway, because it's the most fun part anyway. So we talked a little bit about some other capabilities. I'm going to jump over here to a different instance and showcase some features like tenants. So here I have a series of tenants. I have 13 tenants. Sorry, water break. Fighting a cold, apologies. So we have 13 tenants here in our tenants list. What you're seeing here is each tenant has a name, obviously, but it also has a series of tags. So this one is more oriented to the Americas, obviously, but you could imagine this would say Central Europe or Eastern Europe or Western Europe. These I can denote and make them targets available for me to deploy to through these tags. Tenant tags can be associated with different types of environments as well, as indicated here. I can also specify the projects that those tenants are applicable to. When I define those things, oh, sorry, my, there we go, we're back. All right, sorry. My video camera has just conked out on me, so I'm going to restart it here so you can see, not that it's that important. All right, we're back. There you go. I don't know why that happened, but there you go. We are live, so there you go. True test of that. So when I look at my deployments here for these utilizing tenants, etc., I can click on one of these, for example, and you can see that I've got my deployments executing here as part of this. So if I take a look at the releases here, you can see that I've got the same sort of audit log that I showed you earlier. I can drill into each one of those if I want, and I can take a look at where those things are actually deploying to, which is very, very powerful for me. I can also get to the tenant tags here directly here if I want. These are a list of other tenants as well. I can take a look at my variables associated with this. So variables are those properties that may change between environments, for example. I may want to change their scope as well, which I can do. I can define sensitive variables as well. Sensitive variables will not leak, obviously, as part of the deployment. They are like a one-way operation, so you can write them, but when it goes to reading them, they are part of the deployment process and integrated there. They are never emitted out, etc., etc. So yeah, that's basically some of the capabilities there. Let's talk a little bit about how this all gets triggered. So, as a deployment tool, you can obviously do deployments directly through the UI, but oftentimes you do this as part of an automation. So, where does that automation start? Typically, that automation starts with a CI process like GitHub. So, here I am in GitHub. This is a project we have set up. You can take a look at this as a public repo if you wish. It's called Octopus Shop. And inside here, I have a workflow defined as part of this repo. Workflows in GitHub are just YAML files. You know, take that for what it's worth. I'm not a big fan of YAML, but there you go. But what we have here is a description of our deployment process, or sorry, our CI process. This is our workflow for building out our solution. So you can see here, we're doing things like, let me pump up the font. So you can do things here like typically like a checkout, set up .NET, etc., do a build. So we're utilizing the .NET CLI to do that. Then down here later on, after we've done all our build and all our testing, etc., we come down here and you'll notice that there are actually actions that are specific to Octopus Deploy. So we have a series of actions available in the GitHub Marketplace. I think we're up to 12 now. So if we go to github.com/marketplace and take a look there for Octopus, search for Octopus Deploy, you'll see a wide variety of actions we now have available. So these are our actions that you can use as part of your GitHub actions process or workflows in your YAML files. So you can do things like push packages, you can run runbooks, you can do a deployment of a release, you can create a tenanted release if you want to, for example. These and other types of actions you can run and then define as part of your GitHub workflow. We also have a GitHub app that you can take advantage of. So if you're not wanting to basically share API keys, etc., and you want to do deployments automated through an app process, you can certainly do that. We have an app available for you. And probably worth mentioning, we also have integration with GitHub Copilot, as I mentioned before. So there's our extension for GitHub Copilot. If you so wish, you can integrate this with a scenario like VS Code, and you could ask questions of VS Code. You can say like, what are the state of my deployments, etc. So there's some really cool innovations there. So just wanted to show you that just for completeness of how that looks. So in here, you define a workflow, and then when this workflow runs, it will execute and perform steps against, obviously, your Octopus instance. And I believe the action itself has run recently, so you can see we had one run 3 hours ago. You can see the build step here, and then down here at the bottom, you can see we've got our we're packaging up our executables, our DLLs, in this case for .NET. Once those things are done, we're then going and pushing those packages to a GitHub feed, a NuGet feed, for example. If I was utilizing this as part of Octopus Deploy, we could certainly do that as well, and those steps would execute in concert. So there you go. If I'm utilizing a solution like Azure DevOps, we have integration there. So you can see we have our various operations. They're pretty much the same in every CI process that you target. It's like, create a release, deploy a release, push a package, run a runbook, etc. These and other operations we have built in. So you can utilize this with Azure DevOps. We have integration with Circle CI. We have integration with BuildKite. We have integration with Jenkins and all kinds of other CI solutions. So just wanted to show you two here. This is basically how the world starts in terms of a CI/CD process that integrates with Octopus Deploy. And of course, all those integrations are available. You can take a look at those if you so wish. All right, let me jump back to the slides. And awesome. So that was a lot. We are 43 minutes in. I want to be conscious of time. What you have hopefully learned in this webinar is you've seen a little bit about how Octopus works, but hopefully, most importantly to me, is I hope that you've learned why you may want to consider using a deployment solution like Octopus. That, understanding the why behind the technology is immensely important. In addition to that, we covered a lot of the fundamentals. We showed you how a deployment process is constructed through steps, talked about projects, talked about releases, talked about environments, etc. Didn't have time to talk about other things as well. Showed you briefly tenants, etc. There's lots of parts there. It's an immensely powerful product. Showed you how to create a deployment process from scratch. There are many other deployment processes that are out there. I've seen customers with deployment processes with like hundreds of steps, so they can get pretty gnarly. And then finally, showed you how you can trigger a deployment process either through, GitHub Actions or Azure DevOps, etc. Just simply doing integration with YAML. So there you go. Awesome. So that brings me to the end of my slides. Thank you for your time and attention. Really appreciate it. I'm just going to quickly here check if there are any questions. Oh, sorry. Chris is pointing out here. Don't forget to add Octopus to your wish list for Santa. That's a great point. Thank you, Chris. Great point. Got to make sure you, make sure you put in those requests for Santa Claus. Very, very important. All right. Just making sure there aren't any more questions here. All right. Well, thanks. I really appreciate your time and attention joining me here today. Sorry for the little hiccups there, but there you go. That it is. I wish you all the happy holidays and all the best in the new year, of course. And last but not least, happy deployments, everyone. We'll take care and we'll see you on the next one.